He put a dead sparrow on my pillow, a chilling promise of what was to come, but he never imagined that single, terrifying act would be the catalyst for his own destruction. The fluorescent hum of the town hall was deafening. It was one of those sounds you don't notice until it's the only thing you can hear over the frantic beating of your own heart. I gripped the edges of the wooden lectern, my knuckles white. Across the room, under the grand seal of the city, sat Councilman Richard Sterling. He looked like he was carved from polished marble and expensive cologne, a perfect smile plastered on his face that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He was the king of this little kingdom, and I was just a 23-year-old gnat buzzing in his ear. My voice trembled at first as I laid out my case. I spoke about Blackwood Creek Preserve, the last stretch of untouched wilderness within city limits. I talked about the endangered songbirds that nested there, the ancient oaks that had stood for centuries, the quiet stream where my grandfather taught me how to skip stones. And I talked about Councilman Sterling's plan to bulldoze all of it for a luxury condominium complex called the Sterling Estates. Original, I know. I presented data, environmental impact reports, and a petition with over 5,000 signatures from local residents. I poured every ounce of my passion and research into that 3-minute speech. When I finished, there was a smattering of applause from my supporters in the audience, but all eyes were on Sterling. He let the silence hang in the air for a moment, a predator enjoying the fear of its prey. Then he leaned into his microphone, the smile on his face widening into a condescending smirk. "Well, thank you, sweetheart," he began, and the room went still. The word dripped with patronizing dismissal. "That was a very spirited presentation. It's truly wonderful to see young people so passionate about birds and trees." A few of his cronies in the front row chuckled. My face burned with humiliation. "But we live in the real world," he continued, steepling his fingers. "A world of progress, of economic growth. While you've been out counting squirrels, my office has been working to bring jobs and prosperity to this city. This development will create hundreds of jobs and generate millions in tax revenue. That's something a petition and a few blurry photos of a sparrow can't do." He looked directly at me, his eyes glinting under the harsh lights. "Perhaps when you're a little older, you'll understand that progress sometimes requires difficult choices. It's not all fairy tales and skipping stones." The room erupted in a mix of polite applause for him and angry murmurs from my camp. The gavel banged, and the meeting was adjourned. I felt dizzy, my carefully constructed arguments swatted away like they were nothing. He hadn't just disagreed with me. He had belittled me, painted me as a naive child in front of the entire city council and the local news cameras. I packed my notes into my canvas bag, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and defeat. People offered me sympathetic pats on the shoulder as I made my way out, but all I could feel was the sting of his words. I was almost at the door when his voice cut through the noise behind me. "Miss Albright." I turned. Councilman Sterling was striding toward me, reporters trailing him like pilot fish. He stopped right in front of me, forcing me to crane my neck to look up at him. His smile was gone, replaced by a look of sheer reptilian coldness. "A word of friendly advice," he said, his voice a low murmur just for me. "Drop this. You're in over your head. Go back to your nature walks. It's for the best." It wasn't advice, it was a threat. He thought he had won. He thought he had crushed my little crusade with a few condescending words. He saw a defeated 23-year-old girl, holding a bag full of useless papers. He had no idea what I was really holding. He had no idea that nestled at the bottom of my bag, tucked inside an old mint tin, was a small black thumb drive. A thumb drive given to me by a terrified, guilt-ridden former city planner, who Sterling had ruined years ago. A drive filled with scanned documents, secret ledgers, and audio recordings. A drive that detailed every bribe, every illegal zoning deal, every shell corporation that had built his entire corrupt career. I looked up at him, the powerful man who thought he was untouchable. The humiliation from his speech was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I let a small, tight smile touch my lips. "Thank you for the advice, Councilman," I said, my voice steady now. "But I think I'll see this through. By the way, how is Mr. Finch these days? I do hope his consulting firm in the Cayman Islands is doing well. The shift was instantaneous. It was like a mask cracking. For a split second, the polished, confident politician vanished, and I saw a flicker of pure animal panic in his eyes. His jaw tightened, the blood draining from his face. He knew that name, and he knew that no 23-year-old activist counting birds in a park should ever know that name. He recovered in a heartbeat, the mask of the charming politician snapping back into place. He even managed a tight, humorless chuckle. "Mr. Finch? I'm afraid I don't know anyone by that name. You must be mistaken." But his eyes told a different story. They were like shards of ice boring into me, trying to see how much I knew, how much I was guessing. The reporters, smelling a story, leaned in closer, their microphones like a bouquet of black flowers between us. "Is that so?" I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the noise. "That's odd, because his name is all over the preliminary deeds for the Sterling estates, right next to the account numbers for a bank in Grand Cayman." Sterling took a half step back. It was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. The reporters saw it too. Their eyes darted between us, a feeding frenzy about to begin. He couldn't risk this playing out in front of the cameras. He reached out and grabbed my arm just above the elbow, his grip surprisingly strong. His smile was back, but it was a predator's baring of teeth. "Miss Albright seems a little overwhelmed," he announced to the reporters, his voice booming with false concern. "It's been a long night for her. Let me just escort her out." He started pulling me toward a side exit, away from the main crowd. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a mistake. I had cornered him, and now I was alone with him. "Let go of me," I hissed, trying to wrench my arm free, but his fingers dug in like talons. "You have no idea what you're doing," he snarled into my ear, his cologne thick and suffocating. "You're playing a game you can't win, little girl. Those files you think you have? They'll bury you." "They're not going to bury me," I shot back, finding a sliver of courage. "They're going to bury you." We reached the heavy oak door of the side exit. He pushed it open and shoved me into the cool night air of the empty alley behind the town hall. He stood in the doorway, framed by the light from inside, his face a mask of controlled fury. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Give me the drive, tell me who gave it to you, and I'll forget this ever happened. I'll even make a sizable donation to your little bird-watching club." I just stared at him, my mind racing. The man who gave me the drive, Mr. Gable, had been the city's head planner. A good man, a family man, until he refused to sign off on one of Sterling's crooked land deals. Sterling had systematically dismantled his life, planting false evidence of embezzlement, leaking rumors to the press. Gable lost his job, his pension, his reputation. He gave me the drive a month ago in a dingy coffee shop, his hands trembling so badly he could barely hold his cup. "He can't be allowed to keep doing this," he had whispered, his eyes haunted. "He destroys everything he touches." "No," I said to Sterling, my voice shaking but firm. His face hardened. "Wrong answer." He gave me one last venomous look and then stepped back inside, the heavy door clicking shut behind him, plunging me into the sudden darkness of the alley. I stood there for a full minute, gasping for breath, the imprint of his fingers burning on my arm. Then I ran. I didn't stop running until I was fumbling with the keys to my tiny second-floor apartment. My roommate Sarah was on the couch, surrounded by textbooks. She looked up, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, Chloe, I saw you on the news feed. You were amazing. But then Sterling got all weird and pulled you away. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I breathed, locking the deadbolt and sliding the chain into place. "I think I saw the devil." I collapsed onto the worn armchair, pulled the mint tin from my bag, and opened it. The small black thumb drive sat nestled inside. Sarah's jaw dropped. Is that it?" I nodded. For the next hour, I told her everything. About Mr. Gable, about the files detailing years of extortion, money laundering, and illegal deals funneled through shell companies, all leading back to Sterling. The Blackwood Creek project was just the tip of a very dirty iceberg. "Chloe, this is insane," Sarah whispered, staring at the drive as if it were a bomb. "You can't go to the police. He owns the police chief. You can't go to the local paper. He's on their board of directors. What are you going to do? I have a contact, I said, my mind finally clearing. My old journalism professor. He has a friend at the Boston Globe, an investigative reporter. A real one. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated. I'm going to call him tomorrow. I'm going to send him everything. It felt good to have a plan, to take back control. For the first time all night, I felt a flicker of hope. I was going to expose him. I was going to win. Sarah was still pale. Just be careful. This guy sounds dangerous. I will, I promised. We stayed up for a while longer, a nervous energy buzzing between us before finally turning in. I barely slept, my mind replaying Sterling's face, his threat echoing in my ears. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I made coffee, sat at my small desk, and got ready to make the most important phone call of my life. My apartment felt like a sanctuary, the one place he couldn't touch me. I picked up my phone and my bag to grab my notebook with the reporter's number, but my bag was open on the floor where I'd left it, and my notebook wasn't inside. My heart skipped a beat. I scanned the room. My eyes landed on my bed. My comforter was pulled back neatly, and sitting directly in the center of my pillow was my notebook. On top of it, perfectly still, lay a small, dead sparrow, its delicate feathers unruffled. A scream caught in my throat, hot and silent. The sparrow. It was one of the endangered songbirds from Blackwood Creek. I was sure of it. Its tiny body was a declaration, a brutal, intimate message. He had been here, in my apartment, while I was sleeping. The thought sent a wave of ice through my veins, so cold it felt like fire. He had bypassed my deadbolt, my chain lock, and walked through my home. He had stood over my bed, watching me sleep, before leaving his grotesque calling card. My sanctuary was violated, shattered. I wasn't safe here. I wasn't safe anywhere. Sarah must have heard me gasp because she appeared in the doorway of my room, her own face a mask of sleepy confusion that quickly morphed into horror. "Oh my God, Chloe! What is that?" "It's a warning," I whispered, my voice a ragged, unfamiliar sound. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the bird. It was a clear threat. This is what I do to the little things that get in my way. My hands trembled so violently I could barely pick up my phone. I backed out of my bedroom, pulling Sarah with me, my eyes darting into every shadow. Was he still here? Was this a game? The silence of the apartment was suddenly menacing, filled with the ghosts of his footsteps. "We have to go," I said, my voice cracking. "Now, pack a bag, just the essentials." "Go where?" Sarah asked, her own panic starting to rise. "Chloe, we should call the police." "No," I said, more harshly than I intended. "The police are his. He put a dead bird on my pillow, Sarah. Do you think a restraining order is going to stop him? He wants me to be scared. He wants me to run to the people he controls so he can discredit me, call me hysterical, and take the drive. That's the only thing he cares about. The thumb drive." I frantically dug through my bag, my heart pounding a deafening rhythm against my ribs. It was still there, safe in its mint tin. A small, cold piece of plastic that held the power to either save me or get me killed. We moved in a blur of terrified energy. We threw clothes into backpacks, grabbed our laptops and chargers. Every creak of the floorboards in the apartment above us, every car horn from the street below, sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. I felt watched, exposed. I grabbed the notebook from my bed, carefully nudging the dead sparrow off with a pen before snatching it up. I couldn't leave the reporter's number behind. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My professor, Mr. Davies, he lives about 40 minutes from here, in an old farmhouse way out in the country. He'll help us. We can stay there." We practically ran from the apartment, double-checking the locks behind us as if it mattered anymore. The short walk to my beat-up sedan felt like crossing a minefield. I half expected Sterling himself to step out from behind a parked car, that cold smile on his face. We got into the car, and I locked the doors, my breath coming in ragged bursts. I peeled out of the parking lot, checking my rearview mirror every 10 seconds, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. For the first 20 minutes of the drive, neither of us spoke. We just watched the city shrink behind us, replaced by winding country roads and thick stands of trees. The paranoia didn't fade. Every car that got too close felt like a threat. Every glint of sun off a windshield felt like surveillance. "How could he have gotten in?" Sarah finally asked, her voice small. "I don't know," I admitted. "A spare key from the landlord? A professional lockpick? It doesn't matter. What matters is that he did it to show me he can get to me any time, anywhere. He wanted to prove that no lock can keep him out, and that I had nowhere to hide. The sight of Mr. Davies's familiar, rambling farmhouse was the first bit of relief I'd felt all day. It was set far back from the road, surrounded by fields and a thicket of woods. He was a widower in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a fierce belief in the power of the press. When he saw our pale, frightened faces on his doorstep, he ushered us inside without a word, his expression grim. Inside, surrounded by the smell of old books and pipe tobacco, I laid everything out for him. I told him about the town hall meeting, the threat in the alley, and the bird on my pillow. Finally, I took out the thumb drive and placed it on his heavy oak desk. He listened intently, his brow furrowed. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, staring at the drive. "This is bad, Chloe," he said, his voice grave. "Richard Sterling. He's more dangerous than people realize. He has roots that go deep into this state's political machine." He picked up the drive. "But this," he said, holding it up, "this could sever those roots entirely." He led me to his study and plugged the drive into his computer. As the files loaded, his eyes widened. Spreadsheets of offshore accounts, audio files of Sterling making deals with shady developers, scanned contracts with forged signatures. It was all there. It was a corrupt politician's entire playbook, laid bare. "This is dynamite," he breathed. "My friend at the Globe, David Chen, he lives for stories like this. He'll know how to handle it. He'll protect you." He picked up the phone and dialed. My hope, which had been flickering like a dying candle, flared back to life. This was it. This was the turning point. Mr. Davies spoke in low, urgent tones, and I could hear the muffled, excited voice of the reporter on the other end. "He's in," Mr. Davies said after hanging up, a rare, fierce smile on his face. "He wants to meet tonight. He said this is a Pulitzer waiting to happen. He's going to drive down from Boston himself. He says to meet him at the old diner off Route 9 in an hour. The Starlight Diner. He'll be in a booth at the back." Relief washed over me so intensely I felt lightheaded. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," he said, handing me the drive. "You're the brave one. Now go. And Chloe," he added, his expression turning serious again, "be careful. Don't talk to anyone else. Just go straight there, give him the drive, and come straight back here." I nodded, clutching the drive in my hand. Sarah decided to stay at the farmhouse, too shaken to go back out. I got back in my car, my heart a frantic mix of terror and exhilaration. It was almost over. In an hour, the evidence would be in the hands of one of the best investigative reporters on the East Coast. The Starlight Diner was exactly as he described it, a classic silver and neon relic humming on the side of a dark, empty highway. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The smell of stale coffee and grease hung in the air. There were only a few patrons, a trucker at the counter, a young couple sharing a milkshake, and in the very back booth, just as promised, sat a man with his back to me, wearing a reporter's trench coat. My heart pounded as I walked toward him. This was it. The finish line. I slid into the booth opposite him, my hand protectively covering the mint tin in my pocket. "Mr. Chen?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man turned his head slowly from the window. The neon sign outside cast his face in a sickening red and blue glow. It wasn't David Chen, it was Councilman Sterling. And sitting on the table in front of him, right next to a steaming mug of black coffee, was his phone, lit up with a single text message that read, "She's on her way." For a terrifying second the world tilted. The cheerful clatter of plates in the diner kitchen, the low hum of the neon sign, it all faded into a roaring in my ears. My blood ran cold. Mr. Davies. The text message. He hadn't called a reporter. He had called Sterling. The betrayal was so sudden, so complete, it stole the air from my lungs. My one safe harbor, my trusted mentor, had led me straight into the lion's den. Sterling's lips curled into that familiar condescending smile. "You look surprised, Miss Albright. You really shouldn't be. Loyalty is a rare commodity, and a very expensive one. Your professor, it turns out, has a son with a rather significant gambling problem, a problem I was more than happy to help him solve." My mind reeled, trying to process it. Mr. Davies, the man who taught me about journalistic integrity, about speaking truth to power, had sold me out to save his son. The man whose home I had fled to, believing it was the only safe place left. "Now," Sterling said, leaning forward, his voice a low, menacing purr, "let's not make this any more difficult than it needs to be. Give me the drive." My survival instinct, which had been screaming at me to run, was suddenly replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. He thought he had me. He thought he had won. He had taken my safety, my trust, and now he was going to take the only weapon I had left. He saw a terrified girl, trapped and alone in a diner in the middle of nowhere. But he had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated me, one last time. "You know," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "Mr. Davies wasn't the only professor I admired." I kept my hand in my pocket, my fingers wrapped around the mint tin. I also had a tech professor, Dr. Anya Sharma. Brilliant woman. She taught a fascinating class on data security and recovery. She always said, "Never put all your eggs in one basket, and always, always have a cloud backup." Sterling's smile faltered. The confidence in his eyes flickered, replaced by a dawning unease. "Before I even left my apartment this morning," I continued, leaning in myself, matching his intensity, "I uploaded the entire contents of this drive to a secure, encrypted server. A dead man's switch, you might call it. There are 3 emails, drafted and ready to go. One is to David Chen at the Boston Globe, the real one this time. The second is to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. And the third is to a national wire service. If I don't log into that server and enter a specific code every 6 hours, those emails send automatically. With all the files, every last one." I watched the color drain from his face. The predator was suddenly looking at his prey and realizing it had fangs. "You're bluffing," he hissed, but there was no conviction in his voice. There was only panic. "Am I?" I pulled the mint tin from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. I slid it across the greasy formica. "Take it. It doesn't matter anymore. This drive is just a copy now. The real evidence is out of your reach. It's everywhere and nowhere, just waiting for a signal, or more accurately, a lack of one from me." He stared at the tin as if it were a snake. He had built his entire world on threats and intimidation, on the belief that everyone had a price or a weakness. He didn't know how to handle someone who had already planned past his own capture. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice tight. "I want you to leave. Get up from this booth, walk out of this diner, and disappear from my life," I said, my voice hard as steel. "You will drop the Blackwood Creek development. You will resign from the city council effective immediately, citing personal health reasons. And you will never, ever contact me, my friends, or my family again. If you do, if I so much as see your shadow, the emails go out. If anything happens to me, a car accident, a sudden illness, anything at all, the emails go out. You are going to spend the rest of your miserable life wondering if today is the day your world comes crashing down." We stared at each other across the table, the air crackling with tension. He was a cornered animal, and for a moment I saw the raw violence in his eyes. I thought he might lunge at me. But then something broke. The power, the arrogance, it all just deflated. He had no moves left. I had taken the board away. Slowly, deliberately, he picked up the mint tin. He stood up, his movements stiff. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the diner, the little bell above the door chiming his exit. I watched his car speed away into the darkness, and then I finally let out the breath I felt like I had been holding for days. I sat there for a long time, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief, until the waitress came over and asked if I was going to order. The next morning, the headline of the local paper read, "Councilman Sterling abruptly resigns, citing health concerns." The Sterling Estates project was officially declared dead a week later. I never saw or heard from him again. As for Mr. Davies, I couldn't bring myself to be angry. I just felt a profound sadness for the good man who had been broken by a corrupt system. I never exposed his betrayal. His own conscience would be punishment enough. I didn't stop, though. The fire Sterling had ignited in me didn't go out. I majored in environmental law. I organized, I protested, I fought. I learned that the world is full of men like Richard Sterling, men who believe their power makes them untouchable. But I also learned that they all have a weakness. They underestimate the quiet ones. They mock the activists. They never stop to think that the 23-year-old girl they dismissed as a naive tree hugger might just be the one holding the files that will bring their entire corrupt world crashing down around them. And they never see it coming until it's far, far too late.